the information, very little information in the pre-scene. The reason is that there are a lot of content in the, sorry, there's little information in the unseen because there's a lot of content on this area given in the pre-scene paper. So what this information says, at the last board meeting, that CFO was very concerned about reliability of financial reporting. He further explained that the role of the board in setting the tone for a sound internal control system is important and recommended to strengthen. He mentioned about setting the tone. Can anybody tell me when we say setting the tone, it refers to one thing in the internal control framework? What is that one thing? And recommended to strengthen the role of internal audit function. As you know, the pre-scene or if you look at the pre-scene, it says that internal auditor reports to CFO, which is a significant gap in terms of best practices. And then someone started that despite, someone means who? The managing director and chairman. He said that despite many business risk, company was able to achieve its financial targets due to aggressive management style. Now, any one of the students here, can you tell me this part that I highlighted is one of the answer that you can write as a part of part 2. Very sensitive information. What is the topic here? What is the risk here? That they were able to achieve financial targets due to aggressive management style and the incentive scheme. So what does it mean? The aggressive management style and incentive scheme? And easily answer to risk of misstatement, right? So what is the answer? How do you convert this to answer using your knowledge? Any feedback? I think I should not ask question because you are not responding. Yeah, sorry, I think some students are writing. Yeah, very good. So Lakshma says answer all the question, but time was a matter. So now actually you can see whether your answers are right. Okay, so I'm going to show you a very comprehensive answers that are developed. Of course, you will not write the same answer, you will not come up, but as long as your answer is logical, it's good. So yeah, now one student says it's fraud risk, but I want to ask more specifically, if you want to write this, what is the specific the topic or the headings for your answer? Don't just say fraud, right? Fraud risk due to what? So be specific, then you will get marks, and to be able to explain that specificity. Yeah, anybody? Right, that's the skill that you need to develop, right? So this aggression or aggressive management style may indicate management override of control. Very big point. And in the case study, there are already indications that management override of control is possible, right? And that financial targets is an incentive, which we call fraud risk indicate that there may be fraud in the area of revenue recognition. Why? There is a rebuttable presumption. Now see, if you add those, you will definitely get marks rather than just writing fraud risk. Huh? Fraud risk is obvious answer, but you need to be very specific in this case study. These aggressive targets means what? The keyword that you have to use is what? FRF. What is FRF? Fraud risk factors. So what is the particular fraud risk factors that we are talking? Right, that is incentive. What is the incentive we are talking? The incentive scheme, right, linked to revenue, which create temptation for them to increase the revenue, right? And there are other fraud risk factors. So like that, you should be able to really connect your answer. And I also ask you another question: what is setting the tone means? The control environment. So he CFO indirectly says, look here, control environment is the backbone of internal control system, right? Now, we need to write or evaluate. The see, action verb evaluate is not just to list. Now, what is the meaning of evaluate? The evaluate means you are using the knowledge of this course of components, but using your judgment to explain to what level these elements are prevalent in the case study. So that's your own, judgment based on the case study facts. Now, can somebody tell me quickly, if I ask you to list what are the course of I components, that's very what shall I say, a basic answer that I should ask from a corporate level or business level students. But at your level, if I ask you a question like this, what is the elements that you are mostly concerned about 5 components of COSO? Which element is really concerned? Now see, don't think that this is only a mock exam answer discussion. There is a greater chance in your actual exam COSO framework can be tested. It's such a bigger topic in your syllabus. One of these topics, wording may be different, definitely is right, can come. Because these are such two bigger topics that connects to that 20% weightage on internal control and risk of misstatement. And as you know, there is already a discussion to kind of uh, relate this paper more from next year to more towards the financial reporting. So therefore, it's very important that you use your accounting standard knowledge to come up with risk. So what are the, if I ask you what are the 5 components, of course, you must know, but again, you will never ever forget COSO framework if you remember it logically. Always think why we need a control framework, because we need to drive some objective. Now, as the case study say, one of the very objective of here from the control framework is to ensure reliable financial reporting. So reporting is one of the objective of COSO framework to ensure the reliability, right, of financial reporting. So now you have to ask, if I need to have a set of accounts, right, the first thing that we need to have is to ensure that directors, right, or the top leaders won't influence financial reporting, or they are not corrupted, or they are not manipulated. So that's where the tone at the top comes. The tone at the top means control environment. So now one big part of your answer is to talk about control environment, right? Once you have a good control environment, the idea is that directors, now we can say now in auditing standard, control environment can be explained in terms of governance practices, right? Culture, right? Now these issues are already in the pre-scene, the governance related issues, how companies culture, right? And then the authorization, how they attract talents, things like that. So in short, if there are ethical issues, integrity related issues, the weak corporate governance like CEO and chairman is the same person, no audit committee, things like that indicates that overall environment for control is weaker, right? So if overall environment is weaker, then obviously we can't think about the next element. What is the next element after control environment? How business identify risks, those business risks that is going to affect numbers. So idea is how company identify business risk that will result in risk of material misstatement, right? So in this case study, you should be able to talk about risk assessment in this case study. I'm going to show the answer in another 2-3 minutes. Before answer, you can't just copy paste or memorize and write. Really give some example from the case study as to what you think about risk assessment practices of this company. Are they identifying risks that can affect financial statement? Can any student use the chat and give at least one example? This risk is a business risk and that can affect financial statement. Anybody? Yeah? No answers? So that's where I'm trying to challenge your thinking. How do you connect? To the case study. Yeah, theory always you read. No? What is more important is connectivity with the case study and how do you step by step write your answer. No answers. So let us say one of those. There are many risks in this case study. For example, if you see they have village issue, they are dumping wastewater. So these are business risks. The environmental authority can stop their operation. That might be going concern or serious operation disruption. When that happens, It may be a provision or contingency in the financial statements, the compliance with the laws and regulation. So that's about the risk assessment. So you have control environment risk assessment. And similarly, we spoke about, now this company talks about the product liability, the customer claims. Again, those can result in a liabilities, provisions or liability. So once the risk assessment process is available, then we have to talk about control activities. Now, if you read, this case study has several issues. For example, IT general controls are weak, things like that. So control activities, and then there should be a good information system, information and communication, and finally, the monitoring process. Right? So I don't want to give you a lot of theoretical explanation. Let's go to the case study straight. How should you write your answer? Right now you see how now is the time. Please open your answer. I'm sure you have your answer with you, or at least I wonder whether the answer you are submitting to the CA or you have the answer with you. Anura, normally they are taking the answers with them.
The answer is with them, sir.
Okay, so please check and tell. Yeah, very good. So Pereira, now if you all can now take a red pen. Now this is something that you all don't do. At the end, out of this 45, you can say I scored 35. So it's so easy. You need another 15% to pass. Now the students will say I scored 40 and you are going to be the potential prize winner. So be very confident like that. So now see. I suggest that at least write one sentence about control environment before you write. This is 10 marks question. You may give a brief introduction as to what control environment means and cite some example that talks about the control environment in relation to this case study, right? So that's how you evaluate. And overall, you may want to say that the control environment is weak. So I'm starting with the comment. We are starting with the comments that these are weaknesses. Then you don't need to repeat it. So the explanation for control environment, even if you write the control environment represent the tone at the top, even answer like this may be okay, right? Represent the tone at the top, right? That demonstrate triple A, attitude, awareness, and action of the board and the management regarding internal controls and their importance. So now the definition given here is to say it's a set of standards, processes, and structures that gives the basis. You see, this is the foundation, basis for the internal control, right? So board of directors and senior management should establish. Now see this word tone at the top. That's extremely important word when you want to describe the tone at the top regarding the importance of internal control. Now you may want to give this heading quickly and say that given below are the weaknesses. So what are the weaknesses we have? The culture, right? Now, especially when we say culture, it refers to integrity and ethical practices of this business. You can cite several examples from the case study that raises doubt about integrity and ethics. For example, CFO is concerned about certain accounting treatment adopted by the company, right? So which means the company may select accounting standards. There may be a bias in selecting certain accounting policies. Certain complaints have been received by the company on the quality of the products. So those are some evidence to say that there are concerns about the culture and governance. Especially see this heading when we say the word governance in control environment, the idea is whether directors are independent. Please follow me. Whether directors are independent, which means there are independent directors, there are audit committee members who can challenge the CFO, who can check what CFO is doing. So that is what we call oversight, right? So this, especially this is audit committee role, internal audit role. Now see, this one word is enough for me to pick, okay, what do you mean by governance in control environment? That is essentially to say that the governance is independent from management and they exercise oversight, right, of internal control system, right? So there, what are the case study issues? Now, have you marked I am asking at the end, have you talked anything about integrity and ethics? Give a mark, half a mark or something like that. So at least you mark it that you understand that your points are right. So regarding governance, we know biggest issue given in the case study is that the internal audit is reporting to a CFO. That's a significant internal auditor reporting to CFO is a significant threat to the independence of internal audit function, right? And lack of audit committee, which results in inadequate oversight on internal control over financial reporting, no independent directors, and case study explicitly says that the risk management, right? The enterprise risk management practices are weak, lack of ERM practices, right? So these together suggest that the governance is weak. And then another area that you can comment is they lack documented policies, especially this assignment of authority, because the board can't run everything. They have to assign authority and responsibility, the policies, reporting lines, communication matter, that there is a weakness. Now, based on my explanation, I invite any one of you to comment on the risk assessment, the question that I asked earlier. If you want to explain risk assessment of this company, how do you explain? This is not about audit risk. Huh? As a CFO, how am I, if I am a CFO, how am I understanding business risk that can affect the financial statements? That is called risk assessment. See the word risk assessment. Again, I am giving a brief intro that risk assessment, at least this part is very important, right? How management identify business risk that result in a misstatement. This is from POSO, right? And then we can draw the conclusion that the company has exposed to several significant business risks. Some of these risks can have a direct impact on the financial statements, but they don't have the ERM practices. They don't have the ERM practices, right? So this is mentioned here. Actually, this part you can easily connect to this as well. So our problem is while these issues are there, they don't have a proper risk management process. So you can give some example. Unlicensed software is a significant reputational risk, environmental risk, product risk, fraud risk are the example. Please ask any question. No? Now, what can you talk more specifically about control activity? While theory you can talk, control activities are those policies and procedures, right, that enable management to ensure their directives are carried out. If you don't understand, think about segregation of duty, authorization, reconciliation, various report review, we call BPR. These are the control activity. And information system control, that is IT information system control, right? So these are the control activities. So what can you, is there anything that you want to talk about this case study? Remember, very often students don't get the marks in the exam because their answers are theoretical, no connection to the case study. So that's the point that I'm trying to uh, emphasize. Anything that you comes to your mind? So be interactive, use the chat. So now you have no answers, either you have you have not studied or what, not written anything. So some of the things I mentioned, we introduce what control activities are, but mainly in this case study, we are very concerned about what? We are very concerned about the IT weakness, especially when IT GCs are weak. If you read the case study, they say access to access controls are weak, things like that. If IT GCs are weak, that can have a significant, what is the keyword that you have to use? Pervasive impact on the other control, application control, as well as you may not be able to rely on system generated reports, say debtors aging analysis, debtors inventory aging, because if ITGCs are weak, especially manual controls which are dependent on IT control, you may not be able to rely on. So that's a big point to make. Again, we are drawing from the case study. So the case study talks about this. Then there are a lot of points to talk about information and communication, right? Now we are in we are in the third segment. Fourth segment of course framework. Now, when we say information system, it's about the ERP, whether ERP is integrated or not, how journal entries are reported. Things like that very quickly should come to your mind. As you know, you can't take any books in the exam. Very quickly, you must understand, okay, this information communication. And remember, this is a pre-scene you are studying prior to the exam. You are identifying the points. So the main points that you can draw attention here is to say that this company uses outdated version of ACPAC. This is not fully integrated, right? And also they don't have IT policies in place. Many IT control weaknesses have been found. So which means we will not be able to place more reliance on information system again. And then finally, monitoring activities in the COSO framework. What is monitoring means? The monitoring is to make sure all these other elements are working. Usually, please make a note. There are two types of monitoring. One is ongoing monitoring. Somebody is regularly checking whether controls are working. That's ongoing monitoring. Other one is called separate evaluation, which means at the end of the year, end of the court, internal audit is doing a comprehensive control review when identifying gaps. So now, how do you relate that to the case study, right? The way you can connect this to the case study is to talk about internal audit function because they are reporting to CFO. Therefore, any work done by internal audit, it's difficult to place reliance. Now, this is how we write, we get that 10 marks. So I want some feedback. Can you use the chat and say the students, what is your, be just, I mean, you can talk anything here. Are you happy with your answer? So out of the 10 marks, have you given enough example from the case study to get 10 marks? If no examples, very difficult. Or if you have only given theoretical explanation, you will get maximum about less than 5 marks. Yeah. Or some students would have missed this question. Can I get some feedback quickly? Then we can finish early. Yeah. No feedback. So have you answered at least this question? Nishant, what do you think? Have you answered this question properly, Sahan? Yeah, very good. We have given only examples. My answer is, yeah, I am so happy that you are sharing your views. Remember, you are sharing your views really benefiting rest of the students. This is a learning opportunity. No one is perfect, right? The more you understand your gaps, you will learn more, right? Now, some of you say, if we have given only example, right? And some says, yeah, very good. One student says happy about the answer, but I have to write more. Exactly. Remember, the more you write, the chances of passing exam is high. The more you read a book, only read, the chances of failing is very high. Remember, knowledge alone is insufficient. This paper is I mean, you all are at the last stage. Your synthesis, evaluation, right? Those skills, I mean, more you answer, it helps you to understand. So lack of examples, very good. You are sharing your views. I just explained the theory. So please, theory, give a very little attention. Now, examiner more than theory. Sometimes if any students write only theory, I really doubt whether you will get 1 marks only. Not connected to the case study, theory explain. Very good. So I am very happy that you are realizing the gaps. So it's so important you look at when this answer is shared with you, draw attention to these points, that all the evidence, you must bring evidence from the case study to support your theory, right? So thanks for your feedback. Similarly, I expect feedback. Now, before I discuss, evaluate the risk of misstatement, can you quickly use the chat and tell what are the risks that you wrote in your answer? I'm going to show you, not, I mean, this is only 5 marks, but I'll show you answers like count into about 15 marks, about 5, 6 points. So what are the points that you identified as risk? And again, explanation is very, very important. Anybody? Right. So now check your answer again. One, see what answers you have picked and what answers you haven't picked. So one of the big point in the case study is that non-compliance with laws and regulation, right? Especially environmental laws, waste disposal. So this can even affect the going concern, reputational risk. It can even be the going concern. Now remember, going concern, what is the keyword we are using? This create material uncertainty, right, about the continuity of the operation, which may require disclosure. Now, therefore, this can be one of the biggest risk in terms of going concern. See how we connect business risk. Now, this if the examiner were to ask this question differently, evaluate how business risk will result in financial statement, then again this answer is a good. I mean, you are explaining the business risk, and then finally, it's about the disclosure in the financial statement about a material answer. That disclosure is the audit risk. Imagine if the disclosure is missing, that can be a what matter? Going concern matter, right? In the audit report. But this doesn't go to that level of audit reporting. Don't worry about that. So you have to, in this paper, more concern about risk rather than auditing. Don't think about gathering audit evidence. Those are not going to be tested. So it's all about risk. How to use even accounting. See, this is accounting standard knowledge. Has anyone mentioned about LKS 1? So then you have to be happy with your answer. Product liability claim and litigation. There are a few legal cases I'm sure most of you would have written. Again, see the terminology used here. This litigation may result in, now see the word possible obligation, right? Whose outcome may be uncertain, therefore may require a disclosure, right? This may also give rise, we don't know. If it is a present obligation, it may be a provision. We have to study that a bit. Third answer. Now this one I mentioned at the start, revenue recognition, right? Some of you said fraud, but we are connecting revenue recognition to fraud risk, right? So that is, one is overstatement of revenue. Why? I can comfortably say that because auditing standard says, oh, there's a rebuttable presumption that every company there is a fraud risk, right? Then we can easily support this answer. Another point is that according to the chairman, now we are using unseen information. Company has not been able to achieve financial target due to aggressive management style and the incentive scheme. This is a fraud risk indicator. Now see the word, the keyword again is a fraud risk indicator. What is the name of the indicator? The incentive or pressure. There is also incentive. There is also an incentive to improve profitability of financial position based on the impending share issue, because they are going to list. Now see this is comprehensive. Fraud risk is analyzed in many angles. Then definitely you can write PP revaluation as a risk, because if you look at the balance sheet of this company, very easily you can identify some of the risks. See, when you want to identify risk of misstatement very quickly in the exam, look at while you are looking obvious things like intangible assets. Now, very easily, if I want to write risk by looking at the balance sheet, I know intangible is definitely of area of concern. And for me, this capital work in progress is a huge thing, right? Because it has significantly increased. And the case study, if you read, it talks about companies developing a research center, all of that. And there are the capex, and now I have a risk. You can say, for example, possibility that revenue expenses may be capitalized. They also say they have taken a loan, borrowing cost may be inappropriately capitalized. Then the capitalization, the project completion may be delayed, right? Accordingly, depreciation may be understated. So like that, you should explain possible risks. So these three, all three you can explain as risk. And obviously another item we should look is a revaluation reserve. And now they have done a revaluation. You can see that from the OCI. So revaluation gain is definite hot topic that you can write. So don't just write revaluation. Inherent risk is very high because of the subjectivity, judgment involved. Secondly, because the company is going for an IPO, the Dirisavi board listing, what? There is a management bias to overstate, right? And then the other areas, of course, there are many other areas like that. So now if you go back to the answer, evaluation, see the answer. So first we talk about the inherent risk, because it's subjective assumption. See whether your answer has this part. If you write revaluation, the second element of the answer is to say the fraud risk part. That's the management bias, right? Management bias, overstatement in the, therefore, a possible overstatement, right, for the listing. Therefore, there is estimation uncertainty. Sorry, there is a third element which is explained. That's a part of inherent risk. Remember the environment we are in. Because of the economic crisis, we will not be able to properly establish fair value. That we call the word, technical word is called estimation answer. Now, if any one of these words are there, examiner is going to be very happy. The word management bias, estimation uncertainty, the examiner knows very well that you know the subject, right? Or the risk language in financial reporting. Then PP evaluation, I already explained to you, work in progress. So that may be due to, I'm again connecting to the case study, right? This may represent the cost of construction of new outlets, construction of research and development. Possible risk include capitalizing revenue items, delay, borrowing cost, right? So inappropriate capitalization of borrowing cost, things like that. Then one of the big issue given in the case study is about development cost, right? So there is a risk of inappropriate capitalization of R&D cost, right? As you know, I want you to remember, it's very easy to remember, pirate. What is pirate? Uh, so if you want to understand this criteria for capitalization of development cost, right? Some of these criteria, without those criteria, you cannot capitalize development costs. So what are those? Some of the criteria, technical and commercial feasibility, right? And the intention and ability to use, right? And this economic benefit test. So all of this should be demonstrated, then only you can capitalize. Otherwise, research cost should be charged to P&L, right? So that's another reason. 6 risk here. The other part is management override of control. That's primarily due to a weak ITGC control and access right. Now I want your comments. Imagine, now forget about the marks given. Imagine this question gives 10 marks. Are you happy with your answer? What are some of your learning? Please share your learnings with rest of the students. They will be very happy. And if you have any other answers also, please use the chat option to talk about it. Yeah, one student has mentioned about fraud in distribution. Definitely, that's a valid answer. I think the pre-scenes talks about it. But then when you write it, you have to explain that, possibility of frauds in this area. Describe a little bit. Yeah, any other answers? Or any comments? Are you happy with your answer? Very quickly before you go to now, we are going to a corporate governance case study. We learn a lot. And you can also reasonably expect questions from this area of ESG reporting, non-financial reporting, integrated reporting in your paper. The reason is that these areas are still not explored in examination, right? Yeah, so no comments. So are there comments? Manual journal entries. Yeah. So that manual journal entry part we covered under management override of control. Have a proper heading, write it, explain it. Yeah. Okay, so now if you don't have a feedback, I'll go to the next question. That's the separate 25 marks question on this area of the syllabus, right? Covering corporate governance. Now I will highlight some of the key things that really matter. First thing in the exam is you have to understand. If you understand quickly what examiner is trying, read the examiner's mind. If you can quickly understand what is behind these 25 marks, that gives you the confidence. And first thing to do is to understand, am I knowledgeable about this concept? Here, the first question is stakeholder perspective. I mean, when I see, I'm assuming I'm a student now who has studied well. The moment I see stakeholder perspective, I'm so happy. Stakeholder means they are thinking not only shareholders, everybody. Triple bottom line. That's what comes to my mind. So now I want to find out in this case study, again, answer has to be connected to the case study, right? Of course, in theory, I can say stakeholder approach to governance involve consideration of, right? Because see, you can't consider everybody's demands are different. Shareholders needs more profit. But if you want to give more to employees and environment and governance, that you may not government, you may not be able to get more profit. So it's about balancing conflicting interest of stakeholders. So that part of answer, if you explain meaning in one sentence, enough. Then in this case study, why this matters, I have to explain. So for that purpose, I should pick some factors from the case study. So I mark this in importance in green because I had to read the case study to pick up some points from the case study. Then my answer can be rich. But I know only one part of the answer right now, but I am very confident I'll get this 4. Secondly, recommend 3 main changes to current board to comply with corporate governance practices, Dirisavi board. The moment it says Dirisavi, what should quickly come to your mind is that, okay, normally we need 3 directors. Dirisavi board, it may be 2 directors, right? But then any listing, we know the main things that we need about, the board balance. I mean, those standard answers, no? The board balance, audit committee, remuneration committee, those are very important for listing requirements. So I'm sure the 6 marks I can easily get, right? But then I am still interested to know whether case study talks about anything about the board, balance, things like that. Are there senior directors? Then using conceptual framework approach. Now, this is a famous learning outcome in your syllabus. Conceptual framework approach has 3 things. Can any students tell me now? See, I'm still not reading the question because I am absolutely going to be very confident about the concept. Conceptual framework has 3 things. Can anybody tell me what are the 3 things? One is identify. Second one is evaluate. Third one is what? Evaluate and then you have to identify safeguards. No, but this, if I just write a theory answer, I will not get anything in this question unless I am, see the action verb base, convince. How am I going to convince somebody who doesn't know ethics? That convince, you have to have a very logical approach to answer this from the case study. So I marked in green because I want to pick something. What Chairman is talking about ethics? This ESG, as I told you, is very, very important. Discuss the importance of ESG. Whether I read the case study or not, I know I can score because I have understood ESG. Now, when I use the word I refer to a very good student who has studied, not I as myself. Discuss the importance of ESG reporting based on the current business model. Sorry, discuss the importance, I mark in yellow because that's just theory for me. I can just write one sentence and get 1 marks. Definitely explaining ESG. So in that 1 marks, I may more explain if any company who is going to integrate, see the word integrate, ESG into what? Can anybody tell me into what? Strategy, risk, business model, and reporting. Finally, I give a report. Some companies only are doing a report, but ESG has to be a part of the strategy. If I am going to introduce a new product that I am very concerned, for example, I am going to use ESG as a strategy. I am going to use ESG as an opportunity to differentiate because my product is a product that, for example, I am going to come up with a car with 0 emission. Already there are electric cars, but something, the product that can create a different value proposition in terms of ESG. So that's opportunity. Even I can add the word here, opportunity. See, ESG can be used to seize opportunity and attract more investors. Something like that I write and get marks. Right? But then I need to definitely find what case study information is useful for me, right? Now see, specifically this question is based on the current business model and expectation. Then this part has to be from the case study. But I am very confident again, I'll get this 5 marks. Now, in ESG, what does G means? That is this question. I am sure most of you will not be able to answer this question unless you have thought about it seriously. What is G in ES? Because you study corporate governance. But this is G in ESG. What does it mean? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, once very good. You please ask question. One student is asking 5 marks. Actually, this 5 marks is just to balance this paper. Ideally, a question like this, you will get more than 5 marks. Huh? You're asking a very good question because even always judge the size of the answer based on the marks. If you are getting only 5 marks, don't ever exceed your answer more than a page. It may be even not a full page. But for that internal control question, 10 marks, you may write 1 page, bullet points, subheadings, 5 subheadings, indicators. It's very good. 10 marks, 1 page. So just for 5 marks, you will just write 3 points. But for the clarity, I explained to you more points. Now, I'm sure you may not know what G means. Now, for example, imagine there is one company. No, one company, we think about this case study. So they are manufacturing and see their energy emission, carbon dioxide emission is very high. Now, first of all, the management should know that the emission is high. How do they know? So they need to have a KPI to monitor. And if this KPI is above, right, above the expected level, then this is a concern that they are destroying the environment. So board of directors should know. And also board should be aware about what is material topics to investors. Now, material topics means if I am in the business of, let us say, this is a dairy product, no? Can anybody tell me a material topics in ESG in dairy giant business? Then you are a brilliant student who understand ESG. Material topic doesn't mean auditor's materiality level. Huh? This is totally a different subject. Once we identify material topics, then, right, we need to identify or manage ESG risk, mitigate it, things like that. Anybody material topics, so I'll cover that. So like that, now you understand it's not easy to get 25 marks unless you have studied ESG for 10 marks. Convincing the chairman, not just theory. I can't produce theory. I have to find some word, some concepts, how I convince the chairman. This one is very easy, I'm sure. There is a board listing. And the stakeholder approach also I have to pick up some points. Now let us see the points that I will pick from the case study. Now, in my mind, I know all what I am looking. I am looking for board level matters. I am looking for ESG. I am looking for stakeholder approach. Whatever I identify, mark. If I find something, I immediately go down and put that. If I in a physical exam, I might use that in bullet point in pencil here. Because all this is answer planning. After planning, the answer is straight writing in 10-15 minutes and to get 25 out of 25. That's how brilliant students think, right? I am challenging you. Those who did the paper, you tell me how many marks you got for this question by looking at the answer. And that is the reason if you underscore or undermine or ignore this aspect of the syllabus, your chances of passing the exam reduces. Your chances of becoming a prize winner is definitely reduced. This part is very easy for those students who are very logical, right, and critical about application of theory. Those students who memorize theory, they will really struggle. Right. So let us pick those points. Dairy Giant was set up in 2006. I only highlight what is important. Not pursuing the goal of uplifting social economic status of farmers and making the country self-sufficient in milk production. Company has been in the growth path ever since then. This all history. They are very concerned about the environment, right? They are looking for opportunities. The company has extended its marketing beyond Sri Lanka, so expanding, right? The company was founded by Daya, and here I found one governance issue. You see, managing director and CEO is the same means, the majority of the board should be non-executive, right? So that big point. The board consists of, I'm sure most of you would have identified that point. Board of directors consider 3 directors, right? Of which 2 members are family. So right now there are no independent directors. You can easily recommend that. That's an easy point. So now you can go down and write that point. At the last board meeting, chairman expressed his displeasure over recent contamination of milk product. That's a big ESG issue. Now you see the contamination is a huge ESG risk, environmental and social risk, because see, it's not environmental, it's social risk. The people who consume this product, right, they will get diseases, right? Contamination resulted in significant, the risk is explained is both financial and reputational damage. Chairman further drew attention to media report now modern slavery is another social risk. You know the meaning of modern slavery. Either company is not paying properly or getting lot of work, asking employees to work unplanned OT hours, things like that. Getting more work. So that's modern slavery. Ranil surprised over the media criticism given the commitment of the company. Now Ranil is wondering because he's so committed to environment, but in my company, why these things are happening? Now, which means there is a serious ESG issue in this company, right? And also remember when you answer part one of the question, you have to explain stakeholder approach to governance. Now, this paragraph clearly says that this company has not been able to satisfy the bigger stakeholder, which is the customer, right? And then the other bigger stakeholder, employee, right? So therefore, they need to really think whether they practice stakeholder approach. Now, when it comes to a listed company, they should be very concerned. Now, that is the part of the answer I will write here. I'll show you the answer. Answer written is down. But at the end of my explanation, most of the answers, which is written below, you can visualize and make your own notes as I speak. So this part you can connect to both the stakeholder approach as well as the governance of ESG. Now why chairman should have looked at some KPI, right? Oh, what is the current practice of identifying whether there's a contamination that can cause quality processes? May the board of directors see that? Is there anything to capture labor practices in the company? May not be there. The KPIs, the reviews. So that's the G part of ESG. Then Tushar De Silva, fellow of CA, recruited as the CFO. Tushar is a strong believer of good governance and sustainable business model. He argued that the net asset of the balance sheet may represent 20% of the real market value when about 80% of the market value is non-financial reporting. That's true. CFO recommended that the company could use either integrated reporting framework or GRI framework as a guideline for ESG. Now they are coming to ESG reporting. That's the background information. Then Daya explained the reason for disagreement with former CFO Rangana Pereira and clarified the expectation of the new CFO. Daya said that, Puta, look here, there are some cases you have to look at the company's interests, right? Rather than simply following your standards. You know, Tusita is a tactful guy. He didn't confront chairman at this wider forum at a board meeting. He simply said, okay, sir, I'll have a chat with you. Now that is how you should be mature enough. If you just talk, no, I am a member of the institute, I have to follow. Yes, you have to follow, but there is a way of getting to a conversation. So he says diplomatically, so I want to have a chat with you about this matter. So can I come and see you? So then you are going for a chat, and that chat is the answer you are going to write about convincing the chairman about your ethical obligation. Can any student tell me using the chat option? You will use one word, one concept in convincing the chairman. Then you will write that ethics answer very well if you have captured that word, concept, so to speak. Anybody? Anybody? Code of ethics is the topic? No. We are talking about ethics. I am asking, I want to have a chat with chairman. Chairman says, look here, you have to look at company first before you look at the standards. When I explain the convince chairman, I am using one concept. That's very central to my discussion. What is that concept? That's in ethics. Objectivity is a concept. No, it's all beyond all of these principles. What is that? Now, if you don't, if that is not coming to your mind, you haven't really thought about ethics. Yeah. So, on students, your camera is on, please. So, what is that concept? That is the distinguishing mark of the accountancy profession. Yeah. No. So you see, you are struggling to get to that point. I'll come to that. So that you can use that concept and explain. Then Ranil explained that overseas investor called Colpus is actual overseas huge international hedge fund. You can Google and see that fund is interested in investing and very keen about ESG practices. Tushara recommended the company should now move away from stakeholder centric. So that part we already spoke. Following the recommendation of Tushara, Daya supported the suggestion on listing, right? However, there was an extensive debate among the family members about the new board, right? Hasini strongly advocated that his father, that we should have more non-executive directors, right? But she wants father to continue to be the chairman, right? During the first meeting with Colpus representative, it was mentioned that the stakeholder perspective to governance and board diversity is the key. Now, those are the information. Now, did I find enough information on the case study? Yes, I did. I can now talk about issues companies facing because because of the current risk. It's very important that the issues company face in modern slavery and contamination suggest that they are now not considering stakeholder. And second point in my answer is that so far it has been a family company and probably the concern is on the state shareholder wealth. And now when it comes to a listed company, you have to think far beyond share. Those are my two arguments to get 4 marks. Secondly, I can easily explain the CEO chairman should be split. Majority of directors should be non-executives. There should be independent directors, audit committee, remuneration committee. Those are the answers. Now, this one, so far, no student has mentioned what is the biggest concept that I will use to get into a discussion. Chairman, more than your interest, one interest matter, and that is the answer. That is the central concept when you write this answer. Of course, you will not get marks by writing that word. At least now you should be able to tell me what the concept. Still no. Right. Then discuss the importance of ESG reporting. I already covered. Now let us get into the answer. How you want to uh, cover this, right? Now you see how answer is built. 4 marks. Huh? First, I had to give an explanation. I told you stakeholder perspective to governance is focusing on the responsibility to a wider stakeholder, and this balancing part is very important, right? Balancing the interest, balancing the conflicting needs of the uh, uh, stakeholders to create value. Then I talk about the case study. It appears that the company's current business model is primarily focused on shareholder interests, and the company has failed to take into account interest of certain groups, right? Give example, dissatisfaction of customers over the product quality, concern raised about labor practices, right? Then stakeholder approach to governance means you take a careful consideration of all these interests. 4 marks very easily reach, right? So about the governance practices, the CEO chairman split, right? Especially what are the alternative? Daya is acting as both, right? So he could dominate board decision making. Therefore, it's recommended to split, and split is one. Alternatively, company should appoint a senior non-executive director with a majority of board members being non-executive. Board balance, we already spoke about it. So especially companies, if they have this is about more than the non-executive directors, right? If it is a Dirisai board, specifically in your corporate governance code, it says there should be at least 2 non-executive directors. Both should be independent, right? But however, in this company, if chairman is not independent, you need to have a majority. So then independent directors are required, right? According to listing rule, what's the typo here? when there are two non-executive directors. So I know you know this, right? All two should be independent. Now, these are basic things you can memorize. I mean, remember, but this point sometimes you may not write. Board diversity is important, right? So that's we are just recommending in the new board, they should ensure that they pick some board members who address current as well as strategic issue. For example, ESG issues. They want to recruit somebody who has a knowledge in that area. And more importantly, if you are going to be a listed company, these two committees are mandatory: audit committee and remuneration committee. By listing rule, both of these committees, at least you need to have two directors, right? Now, I want to convince Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, look here. While the company's interest is definitely important, but usually we as the members of the accounting profession, we have an obligation to take care of what is called, what is the keyword? Public interest. So distinguishing mark of the accountancy profession is to protect public interest beyond the company's interest. So there are some cases where the company's interest may conflict with public interest. In such cases, the accountant should carefully use conceptual framework approach to A, identify risk, B, to measure or evaluate how big the risk, C, to identify mitigation. Now, in doing this, specifically, the chairman talks about preparation of accounts because the previous CFO probably left over disagreement. Now, preparation of accounts, especially Code of Ethics says in preparing accounts, right? We need to ensure accounting standard FRF, financial reporting framework, is followed. However, I can exercise my judgment. See, the new Code of Ethics, the word judgment is specifically mentioned in three things are mentioned. One is you have to look at additional, please make a note. This is a new point that you must know. New Code of Ethics, conceptual framework approach, there are some changes. They say that you can exercise judgment. Number one, you should look at further facts that are required. Third, RIPT test. I am sure some of you may not be aware. What is this RIPT test? Can anybody who knows RIPT test, can you use the chat and say what is RIPT test in new Code of Ethics? Anybody? RIPT test? No. So you have to really make sure that you are up to date with the new changes, right? RIPT, okay, one good guess. Reasonable, what is the balance? RIPT, reasonable, RI, 4. When I make my, very good, reasonable and informed third party, which means now I know that there is definite environmental case and I have to pay some amount. So it is not in my balance sheet. But I am trying to, based on chairman's request, say if I am not following ethics, I will try to, not account for it. But a reasonable and informed third party, although he is not an accountant, he knows, okay, when you have to pay, why it is not in your books, he will ask simply that question. That is RIPT test. So now see in the answer how it is written. One of the key points Tushar should explain in the discussion with the chairman is the responsibility of member of the profession, right, to act in the public interest. That's the key word. Accordingly, accountant's responsibility is not exclusively to satisfy the company. Now I am explaining. In ensuring the public interest, you have to meet. Now, some of you will write only about 5 principles, but see, this answer has a logical flow. One, public interest. To do that, we should comply with ethical principles, right? Which establish the standards that I should follow, right? And according to this, now the examiner specifically used conceptual framework approach. Therefore, I must demonstrate that knowledge. So this is important. When I ensure that ethical principles are followed, I have to apply conceptual framework approach to one, identify are there threats, evaluate them and address them. Then Tushar can then explain that he has a responsibility to prepare. Now, finally coming to accounting. prepare and present financial information in compliance with ethical principle. In preparing financial statement, I should be guided by SLFRSs, although I can use my discretion, right? Uh, but remember, as I said, I can use sometimes my discretion as long as it is done in the right intention. Because judgment means sometimes I may have my judgment which is different from someone else, as long as two things. It is not misleading and RIPT test is met. So this is a complete answer which is developed some logical order. And your answer again may not be the same. You may not be able to give the exact answer, but at least some of this concept should be there in your answer. Now, ESG reporting. And I want, please now itself comment on how well you answered in this 25. I definitely want your feedback. Share your feedback among your colleagues. Out of this 25 marks, what is your reasonable score? Right? Now, ESG important is very easy. I told you how to say that. I use the word integrated, no? But here discuss the importance. This question says discuss the importance. Although the company is committed to follow industry leading best practices, it has not been able to manage ESG risks, which could expose the client to a significant reputational risk. See the word integration. Integration of ESG to companies, strategy, business model, governance, risk, and reporting are increasingly considered as material to investor decisions. Right? So that's significant. This connectivity. Further, the way company assess and manage ESG risk is significant to invest as a long-term sustainability. Imagine now this company is having some environmental problem and they are not a going concern because of that. So their sustainability, survival is in question, right? There are also investment opportunity. Now, other word that I use in my explanation is opportunity for low carbon green investment, and you can get. So now some of the tangible benefit listed here. If you are a very much environmentally responsible company, you can attract more talents, you can attract more investors, and it increases your reputation as an intangible driver of revenue. So that's again a complete answer. At least some part of at least some bullet points if you write, you will get 1 or 2 marks. Now this G in ESG is what? Like I said, we start with metrics. I explained to you in the above, when there is a water contamination, what is your KPI? Are you looking any metrics, KPIs, right? Then how do you assess and manage ESG risk? What are your material topics? Now, if this is a company producing milk, or the or similar, now see the say that the water. Now, take for example, Coca-Cola. Will take a more tangible example. One of the hot topic or material topic for Coca-Cola in ESG is water withdrawal. That's why they are spending a lot of money in their ESG initiative to purify water, things like that. One of the big social topic is the health concern of kids. So that's why they create exercise centers, all of that. So that's where the strategy connects, right? So material topic, you must know what is material topics. If you take a hotel in Sri Lanka, again, water withdrawal, all of that. But if you take a bank, water is not a material topic for a bank. That is your understanding of ESG. So we need to understand what are material topics and what is significant to stakeholders and what is the method of engaging these stakeholders. After that, in the annual report, show these are your KPIs and that there is a proper structure, how leadership structure, the board of at the board level, is there a ESG committee, right? What your code of conduct talks about environmental practices, how your business model run, all of that you can report in the annual report using any one of these framework. IR, GRI 17 is what are SDGs, Sustainable Development Goal or UN Compact. Many Sri Lankan companies are signatories to UN Global Compact 9-10 principles. All of these are very much interconnected, right? So now I want you to talk about your answers. Which area you answer? Please make it a discussion point. So this is, you see how easily we can target about 45% of your paper without, really getting stuck with a lot of technicalities, questions, working. Now, this is all about mind exercise, applying your judgment, relating to theories, and logically coming up with an answer. So please talk about your answers. What is your score? What questions do you have, etc. So what do you think? Out of 25 marks, if you want to give a marks to yourself, how would how would it be? Anybody? Anybody who says I have scored about 20, and also be proud. A reasonable mark. Even getting 10 also good, right? 14, good, right? So some students say 10, those students say 10. So try to get at least 20. So you have to work a little harder, do more questions, look at past papers, right? And now, one of the very important message I want to pass, the pre-scene is released. Once the pre-scene is released, don't just study that to answer 10 marks question. Use the pre-scene as the basis of touching almost all the areas of the syllabus. This pre-scene is like a story. Right now, your company case study is a diversified company. So many businesses, you take the learning outcome. Can I apply materiality? Can I apply risk of misstatement, fraud risk to this case study, COSO5 framework, apply everything and write a paper. So that paper, you just write about, you assume question and write. That is very effective way of preparing for the exam for 100 marks. Huh? Of course, the counting standard all are not in the paper, but again, you can use that to refresh. So I think that is essentially what I have to say. I will allow you to ask any of the question that you have. And then, if not, we can. So, yeah, very good. So your answer definitely will not match with this answer that CA will publish. So what is your question? What you have to worry? It's like you are saying that I'm comparing with CA suggested answer and say my answer is different. Obviously, there will be a difference, right? So when there are differences, you have to then ask, when you say question number 1, are you referring to corporate governance questions? I suppose, what is question number 1? I hope you are referring to stakeholder approach to governance, maybe, right? Yeah, so then you have to tell what is the difference in your answer. So if you can copy paste your answer, mention in the chat, I can tell you where the marks can be allocated. See, even at the institute, right? While there is answer that is suggested, there is a proper process of carefully going through your answer. And then if your answer is logical, there is a process of, recognizing those answers rather than just rejecting. So they don't just go by 100% rule-based approach. This is not their 0 marks. No. So logical answer, as long as you have written it properly, you will get marks. So if you want, you can mention what additional points you wrote. I can see whether your answer makes sense. Any other questions from the rest of the students? So if you have any questions about this paper or any other questions from the syllabus area, you can make use this time to ask. If not, I will wrap up the session in another few minutes. So I'm allowing a few minutes, 1 to 2 minutes for you to come with questions, come up with questions. If so, we can take them up. So question, can you please a little bit explain question number 1? Let me go there. Discuss the meaning and importance of stakeholder. Now, what you have cited here, company should be headed by an effective board ensuring and implement. Now, this is the extraction from the corporate governance code, what you have cited here. So that's why I say don't just go with what is in the book, right? You have to understand actually these approaches to corporate governance is not in your corporate governance code open book. It is in the study text. Forget all the books. Think logically. There are different approaches to governance when you learn SL1 syllabus. One approach is called shareholder approach to governance, right? Another one is stakeholder approach to governance, right? So then there are another about three different approaches. The social economic, if I'm not mistaken, there is something to do with economic approach, right? Now, out of that, stakeholder is very popular approach because in shareholder approach, the whole idea is to create value to shareholder. But when you are running a business, who are your key stakeholders? I can make profit by not paying enough salary to employees. So my employee stakeholder is unhappy. I can make profit by compromising the product quality. So my customers are unhappy, stakeholder is unhappy. I can not spend any amount of money to reduce environmental pollution. So I am not a stakeholder. Now see, if you look at in integrated capital, I am destroying the natural capital. That's the again stakeholder is the society at a large suffer because of my way of conducting the business. Now that stakeholder approach to governance is that in your business model, you recognize that for me to drive long-term organizational success, I need my customers to be happy, my employees to be happy, and government will support me. I am paying tax. Any discussion, government is supporting me. Like that, key stakeholders should be happy. If you take into account, although their demands are conflicting, if you balance, that enable your long-term success. I hope I clarified this answer. Don't just go with a book answer. So you have to. So another student asking, RIPT test means student. Now I am a, say, as a chartered accountant, I am evaluating some accounting policy. I took the example of provision is required or not, or any other. So valuation, let us say some valuation, change in the discounting rate and adjust in the valuation. So I exercise my judgment. Now this is, according to this fair based on the fair value standard, I use what? Unobservable data. That is my data, right? Or company specific data. In doing that, I exercise judgment. Now, I know that although I'm exercising judgment, say if I'm going to be biased, I tweak it, the assumption in a very unreasonable manner. Rather than 10%, 1% difference, I make it, say, discounting rate to be ideally it should be in the range of, say, 20, right, to 22. In industry norm also such, but I make it 25, something like that. Unusual. Obviously any reasonable, now you know reasonable party, a party who understand about evaluation and he knows that how the industry things work, inform. And he's a third party, he knows that obviously your judgment is inappropriate. And that is called RIPT test. I hope you understood. Anything else, students? I hope you understood that this part is not difficult. And however, if you don't practice, right, and especially I recommend you to go through the syllabus learning outcome and see there are some areas still not tested in the exam. So you draw a little more attention, but then that doesn't mean other area you have to forget. Other areas also you have to go through. So any more questions? Especially internal control framework is very important section. Question can come in very different ways, scenario wise. So be prepared to answer. Right. So if you don't have any other question, I suppose this session was useful and you understood how to develop your answer with confidence and wish you all the best. Please work hard. So this time is the best time to study. Don't think that little time. There is enough time even now. From now onwards for you to really work hard and to get everybody to complete the exam. Thank you. Good night.